Hey, it's Mir. Welcome to Still Here, Still Trying, the show where Mike Baker sits down, tells the truth, and does his best to stay human in a world that refuses to slow down. We're kicking off a new series today. 5 episodes across the year. Each one breaks down a personality pattern you run into at home, at work, and in those messy human moments nobody warns you about. Mike's shaping these ideas for his next book on human-first leadership, and you're getting the early versions right here. Today we're starting with narcissistic behavior. If you've ever left a conversation wondering why you feel smaller, or replayed a simple interaction because something didn't add up, this one's gonna speak to you. Narcissistic patterns can bend a room fast. If they had a sound, it would be someone dramatically clearing their throat until you finally look up. They're fine. They just needed the spotlight. Mike's gonna slow all of this down in a grounded, human-first way. Clarity, honesty, no drama, just insight you can use. All right, grab a drink and settle in. Here comes your host, Mike Baker, in episode 1 of the Personality Patterns series. Oh, quick note. Mike's not a therapist. This is perspective, not clinical advice. Take it away, Mike. You've got this.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Still Here, Still Trying. I'm your host, Mike Baker. I hope you enjoyed Mira's introduction. She's getting pretty good out there. Well, look, I'm glad you're here. And I know I say it every week because I mean it every week. I'm so glad that you're here. Hey, listen, this year I'm building out something new. I'm going to start a 5-part series on personality patterns, the kind that you see at home, in friendships, in the workplace, and especially inside leadership teams. These patterns shape how we communicate, how we trust, how we handle conflict, and how we connect with the people around us. I'm creating this series. I'm not creating it to have labels for anybody, and this is definitely not about diagnosing anyone. It's about understanding real human behavior so we can protect our peace, lead with more clarity, and stop losing ourselves in the middle of other people's crazy emotional storms. These 5 episodes are going to anchor some ideas that I'm working on for my next book that's all about human leadership. And you're going to get the kind of the early versions right here as I build them out, as I work on them. I feel like it's going to be a really cool project. But here's what we're going to cover this year. And I'll probably label these as special episodes so you can go back and find them. So the first one, we're going to talk about narcissistic patterns. Next, we're going to talk about passive aggressive and avoidant patterns. We're going to then talk about people pleasing and approval seeking. That's probably the one I'm working on the most. Controlling behavior is next. And then emotional shutdown and stonewalling. These patterns show up everywhere, and they really change the emotional temperature of rooms, families, and teams. And I was thinking, when I'm thinking about human first leadership, if I can help people understand those patterns, I think it will help people show up stronger and steadier in every part of our lives, because we all probably have a version of each of those patterns inside our own lives that we're dealing with and trying to do better with. And we're probably all dealing with people in our lives that those patterns are a big part of their lives. So I feel like if we could talk about them, maybe identify each of them and kind of give us some tools to deal with them, maybe the people with those personality traits might be able to hear it and go, oh, maybe that's me, and think about it a little bit, make some changes. Or those of us that are dealing with those personality patterns that are impacting our lives, maybe we'll have a chance to have some tools to figure out how to do it without going crazy. So anyway, today is the first episode in that series. We're going to talk about narcissistic patterns, how they form, how they manipulate, how they show up in leadership and personal life, and how you respond without losing your voice or heart. All right, quick housekeeping before we jump in. If you're new here, welcome. Go hit the follow button, please. The subscribe button, the like button, one of those. Like, this is my ask of you. If you're hearing these words out of my mouth, this is the call to you. Please go hit a button. If you're driving, you can push a button on your screen. If you're out for a walk, just slow down for a second and hit a button on there. hit that subscribe, hit that like button. You could even leave a comment, but not if you're driving. Unless you're using voice text, you can do it. Anyway, this really helps me out. And I think that helps you out because it helps me keep sharing this story. Anyway, share it with someone that you care about as well. And please take a minute and leave a review. Obviously, I like good reviews because I'm not people pleaser. But please go ahead and leave a review for me. Send me a message if you see me on the street. Give me a little head nod. All of this just kind of helps the community growing. All right. Well, let's get into episode 1 of the Personality Patterns series. We're starting, like we said, with narcissistic behavior, which I think is the pattern that people struggle with the most. So take a breath, settle in, and let's get into it. All right. Before we start, I want to be very clear for every listener. Hi, Mike Baker. I am not a licensed therapist. This episode is not about diagnosis. This is education. These are patterns backed by research and years of leadership experience. And I'm sharing this because I've watched these dynamics hurt people that I care about. And honestly, a lot of people ask me about it. So we're walking through it together with honesty and respect. All right. Let's ease in with a story that everyone knows. Let's think back to the amazing movie Beauty and the Beast, right? Let's think about Gaston. Gaston's got that big chest, that loud voice, that perfect hair. Gaston wants the whole town cheering for him morning to night. He performs so hard that no one gets a real view of the human underneath. Everything about him is a show designed to keep a fragile inner world protected. And that blend of insecurity, charm, entitlement, and image obsession mirrors what the research calls narcissistic patterns. Gaston feels bold, but his center sits on shaky ground. Belle saying no doesn't feel like rejection, it feels like exposure. And exposure sends him into overdrive. Okay, well, clinical work from Keith Campbell, Jean Twenge, and Heinz Kohut shows the same structure again and again. It shows a fragile inner world, a polished outer image, a need for admiration, a fear of accountability, a pattern of blame, a drive for control, an emotional reaction that's tied to shame, not connection. And I want to hit that shame piece again because you all know I love Brene Brown. Brene Brown's research hits right here. Her work shows that shame drives people to hide, perform, attack, or avoid. And narcissistic patterns rely on those reactions to survive. The person doesn't want to be bad or wrong. They want to avoid any feeling that looks like I'm not enough. So when these people are in your life, think about it. They're that way because they feel like they're not enough and they have to overperform. I think that's so important to remember that. When someone touches that fear that they're not enough, even gently, man, you see the behavior shift super fast. You might see deflection, anger, dramatic storytelling, victim language, trying to control the narrative, rewriting events, punishing the person who set a boundary. These reactions protect ego, not relationship. And healthy conflict focuses on resolution, but narcissistic conflict focuses on emotional survival. People around them walk on eggshells because the behavior moves without warning. Kind people blame themselves. Empathetic people try to understand. Strong people start shrinking. And leaders who value connection feel pulled into chaos that they never caused. And none of this means that the person lacks humanity. Every human carries shame. Shame shows up in different ways. Some people shut down, some people over-explain, and some people lash out. And probably like you've seen, narcissistic patterns fall into the lash out group. Human first leadership focuses on the human, not the armor. We don't shame them back. Shame never leads to growth. Shame always leads to deeper digging, more denial, or more attacks. We want connection and accountability at the same time. So we focus on clarity, we focus on boundaries, we focus on steady communications, and we refuse to feed the image. We refuse to collaborate with the performance. We talk to the real human when the mask drops, and we absolutely refuse to shrink. Now back to Gaston for a moment. The whole town inflates him. They give him more applause, more admiration, more praise. They protect the image and ignore the harm. The town keeps him powerful by feeding the show. And guess what? A human first response looks very different. A human voice might say, "Hey, look, I see what you're protecting. I'm not attacking you. And I'm also not feeding this version of you. I'm here when you want a real conversation." That approach disarms the behavior without surrendering your values. It protects your dignity and theirs. And it avoids shame while keeping accountability on the table. Understanding the pattern gives people power again. People stop wondering, what's wrong with me? People stop carrying guilt that never belonged to them. And people stop bending themselves into shapes to keep someone else regulated. People stop apologizing for boundaries. And people stop shrinking. We start with clarity because clarity brings calm. Calm brings confidence. And confidence brings connection. And connection shifts relationships and teams back towards something healthy. Okay, well, that's segment one. We're grounded, we're clear. Now I think we're ready for the leadership. Well, guess what? Leadership teams set the emotional tone for an entire organization. People watch how leaders handle pressure. They watch to see how they handle conflict and praise and uncertainty. And when leadership energy feels steady and human, teams feel safe enough to focus on the work. When leadership energy feels ego driven or unpredictable, people start managing the leader instead of managing their responsibilities. Narcissistic patterns create that shift really fast. The behavior doesn't always look dramatic. Actually, sometimes it looks polished. Sometimes it looks confident. And sometimes it sounds like authority. But people feel the impact before they fully understand what's happening. Picture a leadership meeting with one person who always finds a way to pull attention back to themselves. Ideas get dismissed unless they originated with them. Feedback gets twisted. Wins become their story, and losses become someone else's fault. And you see it, the room goes quiet. People trade glances. And good ideas stay unspoken because no one wants to trigger a reaction. Research from Harvard Business Review, Wharton, and the University of British Columbia describes the same pattern: inflated confidence with limited curiosity, charm in early interactions that fades with time, a focus on managing up rather than leading down, discomfort with accountability, selective listening, not because you're just deaf, narrative control during conflict, and praise seeking dressed up as leadership. Well, guess what? That combination wears teams down. People begin second guessing themselves. They hesitate to share concerns. They notice the shift in their own voice during meetings, and they work to avoid the emotional fallout instead of working towards shared purpose. The harm builds quietly. Burnout rises, turnover rises, innovation slows, and people retreat into survival mode. Brene Brown's research, again, helps explain why. Shame changes how we show up. Shame shuts down honesty, and shame makes people hide instead of fixing them. Shame keeps people small. And narcissistic behavior often activates that shame response in others. Not always intentionally, but consistently enough that the room learns to stay careful. So a human first approach takes the opposite path. Human first leadership invites honesty. It names contribution. It owns mistakes. It asks questions. And it listens without punishing the person that's speaking. And it also keeps accountability on the table without shaming anyone. When leaders show up that way, the culture actually recalibrates. People stop walking on eggshells and they share ideas again. They trust the process, they trust each other. And here's the quiet truth: when the room stays grounded, ego driven behavior loses influence. People no longer bend around one person's reactions. They protect the team instead of protecting the performance. And momentum shifts toward purpose, not personality. All right. Well, we've covered how these patterns affect leadership and culture. And now we're going to move into a more personal space because the impact inside families and friendships and even intimate relationships feels very different. It's deeper, it's more emotional, and it's more confusing for people who didn't see it coming. So segment 3 is going to go there with care and clarity. We're going to take this on, but we're going to be deep and really human in this part. Because personal life is where narcissistic patterns cut the deepest. Not because the behavior changes, but because the stakes do. Workplaces have boundaries. Relationships don't always have them. People try harder. People forgive more. People hope things will settle down. People blame themselves. People love even when they're hurting. And that's what makes this part so hard to talk about. The emotional impact of narcissistic behavior starts quietly. People don't notice the pattern forming, but they notice how they feel. And they notice the confusion. They notice the shrinking. Okay. Well, let's walk through this in a way that lines up with real life. So, this first part, like when someone you care about turns the moment into a test. Maybe you bring up something that bothered you, and their response surprises you. They roll their eyes, they sigh, tell you you're being dramatic, they tell you you misunderstood, and they treat your emotions like an inconvenience. And you walk away confused, not angry. You start thinking, maybe I should have said it better. Maybe I misread the tone. Maybe I'm asking for too much. And that shift from clarity to self doubt, it marks the beginning of emotional control. Okay, next, when the story keeps getting rewritten. And this one hits people hard because you remember exactly what was said. You remember the moment, you remember the tone, but during the conversation, the person rearranges details until you feel unsure. They add parts you never said, they remove parts they said. They twist the reason you're upset, and they act offended that you'd even bring it up. And now you find yourself defending things that you didn't do, and the original hurt gets buried under new arguments. People call this gaslighting, but for many people, it simply feels like losing the ability to trust their own memory. Okay, next, when silence becomes the punishment. This is rough. Healthy silence feels like taking a breath, but narcissistic silence feels like punishment. You you get this pattern where there's no replies, there's no warmth, no repair. It's just a sudden wall. People who care, they try to fix it. They reach out. They apologize for things that they didn't cause. And they try to restore connection because connection matters to them. But the silence wasn't about the issue, it was about control. Okay, next, when support comes with strings. Narcissistic patterns often turn generosity into leverage. I did this for you. I was there when you needed someone. No one else sacrifices like I do. What looked like care becomes currency. You feel indebted. You stop you actually stop asking for help and you stop expressing needs and you shrink yourself to avoid the next guilt trip. Okay, the next one. When your joy becomes uncomfortable for them. And this one, I think it breaks people quietly. You get a win, a promotion, a personal milestone, something that you're proud of. And instead of celebrating you, they dismiss it, they downplay it, they shift the subject back to themselves, they point out a flaw, or they'll tell you why it doesn't matter. Joy then becomes something that you hide. You start playing small so they don't feel threatened. People change their whole lives to avoid that reaction. Okay, next, when the relationship becomes a cycle. You see it. You're going to see this charm, tension, conflict, guilt, emotional exhaustion, reconciliation, and then repeat. The cycle never breaks because the person never takes accountability for their part. They focus on your tone, your words, your timing, your reaction, everything except their behavior. I've seen people get stuck for years because they keep hoping that the charm phase will return. They keep telling themselves, oh, they didn't mean it. They were stressed. They apologized. We had a good day yesterday. But the cycle stays, the pattern stays, and the emotional toll stays. Okay, next, let's talk about the people who get caught in this. It's almost never the cold guarded people. It's the steady ones. It's the empathetic ones, the healers, the people who love hard, the people who communicate, the people who reflect, the people who want to understand, the people who believe in repair. These people carry the weight because they care. They overfunction, they over own, they over apologize. They do emotional labor that belongs to someone else, and not because they're weak, because they're good. And here's where Brene Brown helps us make sense of this. Shame tells you you're the problem. You are too emotional. You expect too much. You don't deserve better. Shame creates silence. Shame creates self blame. And shame creates confusion. Narcissistic patterns rely on that silence, and that silence keeps the cycle alive. Human first leadership breaks the silence. Human first says, you're not overreacting. You're not imagining this. You're allowed to set boundaries, and you are allowed to rest. You are allowed to have needs. And you deserve relationships that feel safe, clear, warm, firm, human. This isn't about attacking the person with the pattern. It has to move into that space where it's protecting the person that's losing themselves inside it. All right. Well, now that we've named the personal impact, we can move into the part that everyone waits for: how you respond, how you protect your voice, how you build boundaries that feel strong but compassionate, and how you disarm manipulation without being hard or cold. And this is how human first leadership shows up when the pattern gets loud. So the next section is going to take us into that part. When people hear the word narcissism, they often jump straight to conflict. They think that the solution requires confrontation, calling things out, or cutting ties. Sometimes distance matters, sometimes not. The real shift happens when the person experiencing the pattern learns how to respond from a place of clarity and self-respect. Human first isn't a strategy for controlling anyone else. Human first is a way to protect yourself without losing your heart. So let's walk through what this looks like. Number one, speak in clear, steady sentences. Narcissistic patterns thrive on confusion. The more tangled the argument gets, the more control they gain. Clear sentences disrupt the pattern. Here's a couple examples. I can talk about that calmly, not right now. Or, I'm not accepting blame for something I didn't do. I'm staying grounded in what I experienced. Or, I'm willing to discuss this when we both settle. Those are very clear sentences. There's no extra emotion. There's no over explaining, no defending your worth. Number two, name the behavior without attacking the human. This is really important. This is where human first shines. You don't shame the person, but you don't collapse either. Here's some examples of things you could say. That felt dismissive. Or, I hear your frustration, but I'm still keeping this boundary. Or, that comment was hurtful. I expect something different. This avoids shaming them into defense mode while keeping accountability clear. Okay, number three, stop giving emotional freebies. I love this one. Narcissistic patterns pull on empathy. It's like they get their fuel from the empaths. People who care, they become like emotional first responders, and human first protects that energy. Here's a couple practices. Don't rush to fix emotional outbursts. Don't soothe someone who is hurting you in the moment. And do not apologize to restore peace when you did nothing wrong. And don't explain yourself 10 different ways. Your emotional labor is a resource, so treat it like one. Okay, number 4, reduce access without withdrawing humanity. Distance doesn't need to look cold. It actually can be calm and structured. So here's a few examples. I'm stepping away from this conversation for now, or I'm not available for this dynamic anymore. Or you could say, I'm choosing a quieter pace with you right now. You don't punish, you don't retaliate, you simply protect yourself. Okay, number 5, hold your boundaries through the storm. And this is where it gets really hard because most people don't struggle with setting boundaries. That can be hard, but they actually struggle with maintaining them. And narcissistic patterns push back hard when boundaries appear. You might hear, you're abandoning me, or you don't care enough, or you're acting different, or you owe me more than this. Human first stays steady. You can say, look, I care about you, but I care about me too. And this boundary stays. I won't argue about this again. Calm repetition builds strength. Okay, number 6, do not respond to the performance. I always struggle with this one. If someone escalates or rants or rewrites the story or breaks into victim mode, they're pulling you into the emotional tornado. Human first steps out of the tornado. I'm staying with the facts. I'm staying calm. I'm not joining this escalation. You speak to the human, not the performance. Okay, number 7, focus on what you can control. Narcissistic patterns often create a false sense of responsibility in the other person. People feel like they need to fix everything. They need to manage the moment or keep peace for everyone. And the coolest thing about this is human first gives that weight back. You control your voice, your tone, your choices, your boundaries, your presence, and your emotional availability. You don't control their reactions, their interpretations, their shame, or their story. Separating those two groups protects your worth. Okay, number 8, use compassion without becoming the caretaker. This one's hard. Compassion is not the same thing as caretaking. Compassion can honor dignity without absorbing someone else's weight. Here's some examples. I see this is hard for you. I'm here to talk when the conversation settles. Or I respect you, but I also need respect in return. Notice the difference. You're not absorbing their shame and you're not carrying their fear. You're naming the humanity on both sides. Okay, number 9, let truth do the heavy lifting. Truth disarms manipulation in a quiet way. You don't have to yell. You don't have to prove anything. And you don't need a dramatic final speech. Calm truth creates stability inside you, even when the other person stays reactive. I know what I experienced. I know what matters to me. I know my intention, and I know my limits. This centers you again. This returns control to your integrity. Okay, number 10, remember what narcissistic patterns fear the most. Not confrontation, not criticism, not boundaries, but they fear being seen accurately. When you show up calm, steady, clear, and grounded, their performance loses its effectiveness, not because you hurt them, but because you stopped feeding the pattern. It's probably the most powerful tool. Okay, now we're going to move toward the part that people struggle with the most. When the dust settles and the dynamic becomes clear, people often realize how much of themselves they lost along the way. how much they bent, how much they carried, how much they silenced, how much they changed to keep someone else from falling apart. This next segment is going to focus on reclaiming identity, not in a dramatic way, but in a slow, steady, human first way that rebuilds self worth from the inside out. By the time people recognize narcissistic patterns, they've often lost pieces of themselves without realizing it. Not all at once, but it happens slowly. A little shift here, a small silence there, one avoided conflict, one apology they didn't owe, one boundary that they softened just to keep the peace. People don't notice the erosion until something inside them feels unfamiliar. And this segment is about getting that self back, not through anger, not through revenge, and not through calling anyone out, but through grounding, through clarity, and through coming home to yourself. So let's walk through what that looks like. You're going to stop apologizing for your needs. Narcissistic patterns often train people to believe that their needs are inconvenient. People learn to stay small, to avoid reactions. And over time, even basic needs feel like a burden. Human first gives those needs back to you. Your need for respect matters. Your need for safety matters. And your need for calm matters. Your need for honesty matters. And your need for boundaries matters. You don't apologize for those anymore. You honor them. And that shift alone changes everything. Next, you're going to remember your own voice. One of the biggest losses in these dynamics is internal. People stop trusting themselves. They stop speaking up and they freeze mid-sentence because they are rehearsing every impact before the words leave their mouth. Reclaiming your voice means speaking again without fear of someone twisting it. It means trusting your own perception. It means trusting and knowing that your experience is real. It means telling the truth calmly, even when someone else tries to rewrite it. Your voice is a compass, and every time you use it, you rebuild confidence. Next, you're going to reconnect with your values. Narcissistic behavior often pulls people into a reactive life. Every day becomes a response to someone else's emotions. People lose track of what matters to them. Reclaiming yourself looks like getting clear about what you value, making decisions that are aligned with those values, choosing relationships that feel steady, creating environments that make your nervous system calm, and saying yes with intention and saying no without guilt. This is the moment people go from surviving the dynamic to shaping their own life again. And next, you're going to rebuild your boundaries from a place of dignity. Boundaries built from frustration, they collapse. But boundaries built from self-respect, they hold. Reclaiming yourself means I deserve peace. I deserve clarity. I deserve reciprocity. I deserve to feel seen. That energy changes how you show up everywhere, at home, at work, with friends, and with yourself. And once those boundaries are clear, people stop getting access to the parts of you that hurt to lose. Okay, next, you're going to stop trying to rescue people who don't want to grow. This is so hard. This part frees people more than anything else. Caring doesn't mean that you have to carry everything. Compassion doesn't mean self-sacrifice. And support doesn't mean absorbing someone else's shame. Love doesn't mean losing yourself. Reclaiming yourself means recognizing the difference between empathy and enmeshment. You stay gentle. You stay grounded. You stay human. You just stop giving your emotional bandwidth to a pattern that drains you. Okay, next, you're going to see the pattern without taking it personally. And this is the turning point. Once people understand narcissistic behavior, they stop internalizing it. It's like a light switch. They stop tying their worth to someone else's reaction. They stop believing that they failed. The pattern becomes visible, predictable. It's actually less frightening, less confusing. It takes away all the power. When you stop taking it personally, you stop losing your sense of self. And this is one I've struggled with in my life when I've been impacted by narcissists. This one hurts. But it's the steady internal stance, calm, clear, grounded. That is what disarms manipulation the fastest. Not anger, not education, not emotional distancing, clarity. Okay, the next thing you're going to notice is that you're going to give yourself permission to rest. This work is exhausting. People don't walk away from these dynamics energized. They walk away drained. I had a friend that described this like an energy vampire, that these narcissists, like, they come in and they like drain out all your energy, and that's the only way they can survive. Reclaiming yourself includes recovery. It's quiet time. It's processing. It's breathing again. It's talking with people who see you clearly. And it's letting your body settle after years of bracing. Healing is not dramatic. Healing is slow and steady. Healing happens when your nervous system learns it doesn't have to stay on high alert. Rest matters more than people realize. Okay, next, you're going to remember the truth about yourself. And here's the part that I want every listener to take with them. You don't lose your worth because someone else couldn't hold their own. Just remember that. You don't become less deserving because someone else stayed in performance mode. And you don't become the problem because someone else avoided accountability. And you don't become broken because you cared. Your heart is not the liability. Your empathy is not the weakness. Your clarity is not a threat. The part of you that tried, that's actually the part that makes you human. And reclaiming yourself means honoring that part again. Phew. Okay. Well, we've talked about understanding the pattern. We've talked about leadership. We've talked about personal relationships. And we've talked about reclaiming your identity. And now we're going to shift into the final piece: how to build a healthier future inside yourself, inside your relationships, inside your leadership, and inside your everyday life. Once people recognize narcissistic patterns and reclaim themselves, the natural next question shows up. What do I build now? What does a healthier future actually look like after you've lived through something that distorted your sense of worth, your boundaries, and your emotional balance? We're not talking about perfection here. We're talking about clarity. We're talking about rebuilding your internal world so you don't lose yourself again. And I've seen people working on this. This part's really, really hard. But let's walk through what that looks like. You choose relationships that feel steady, not intense. Narcissistic dynamics often start fast. Intensity masquerades as connection. Attention feels like intimacy, and grand gestures feel like emotional safety. A healthy future feels calmer. You feel safe, you feel seen, you feel respected. You don't spend the whole day rehearsing conversations in your head. You don't walk on eggshells. You don't wonder what version of the person you'll get today. Steady beats intense every time. Okay, next, you build boundaries that don't depend on someone else's approval. A lot of people grew up thinking boundaries require consent. They don't. Boundaries require clarity and follow through. A boundary is a statement about what you will or won't allow in your emotional space. Healthy boundaries sound like, I don't do conversations where I get blamed for things that I didn't cause. I stay calm and I expect the same. Or I step back when the dynamic becomes unsafe. Or I choose relationships that support my well being. These aren't ultimatums, they are self respect that is made visible. Okay, next, you measure relationships by how you feel afterward. And this is simple, but it is life changing. After a conversation, do you feel lighter or heavier? Do you feel seen or dismissed? Do you feel supported or drained? Do you feel grounded or confused? Do you feel respected or minimized? Your future becomes healthier when you trust the answer and trust your body. Your body often knows before your mind does. Okay, next, you take your time trusting people again. This one's hard for me. I'm a trust fast guy. People who've lived inside narcissistic dynamics often jump too fast into proving themselves in new relationships or friendships. They fear being too much, they fear being misunderstood, and they fear disappointing someone. A healthy future moves slower. You let people show you who they are. You watch how they speak to others. You watch how they handle conflict. And you watch how they take accountability. You watch how safe you feel in their presence. Trust becomes a gift that you offer with intention, not desperation. Okay, the next thing you're going to see is that you practice emotional neutrality in the presence of manipulation. Neutrality is not cold, neutrality is actually power. It looks like not rising to bait, not matching someone else's intensity, not jumping into rescue mode, not over explaining, not trying to convince someone of your worth. Neutrality protects your nervous system and it shuts narcissists down. It protects your clarity and it protects your truth. And this is where you gain real emotional leverage without ever trying to control anyone. The next thing you're going to see is that you create a life where your voice matters again. People lose their voice inside narcissistic dynamics. The future becomes healthier when that voice returns. You're going to see yourself speaking up earlier. You trust your intuition faster. You name your needs. You tell your story accurately. You let people witness the real you without shrinking. This is where you build relationships that honor your actual integrity, not the edited version of yourself. And the other thing you're going to see is that you stop choosing chaos that's disguised as passion. And this one hits deep because unpredictability gets mistaken for chemistry. Grand, grand gestures get mistaken for depth, and comfort gets mistaken for boredom. Healthy futures don't require chaos, they require presence, consistency, accountability, care, honesty, and calm connection. You build that slowly with people who show up the same way they talk. Okay, and then you're going to see that you give yourself permission to walk away from any dynamic that breaks your peace. And this is the most human first choice that you can make. Walking away doesn't mean that you failed. Walking away means you learned. Walking away means you protected your heart. And walking away means that you reclaimed your story. You don't need a long explanation. You don't need to justify why you're choosing peace. You are allowed to build a life that feels safe. And peace becomes your baseline, not a rare moment. Okay, and then you're going to see that you rewrite the way that you see your own strength. People who survive narcissistic patterns think that they're fragile. They think they're naive. They think they're broken. But here's the truth. People don't survive these dynamics unless they're strong. People don't keep caring unless they're loyal. And people don't keep trying unless they have heart. People don't keep showing up unless they have integrity. Your strength didn't disappear, it just got buried under survival mode. A healthier future digs it back up. Okay. And this last one here is you're going to build a life where honesty replaces fear. And this is the ultimate shift. You surround yourself with people who tell the truth. You're going to surround yourself with people who own their mistakes, people who apologize with sincerity, people who protect the room instead of dominating it, people who stay during conflict instead of performing or collapsing or throwing stuff down and running out. People who can say, I hurt you, and actually mean it. Honesty creates the safety that narcissistic patterns destroy. And once you experience that kind of safety, you stop accepting anything less. This last segment ties everything together, not in a way that wraps the story in a bow, because honestly, if you survive this, a bow just doesn't make sense. But I'm going to do it in a way that honors your humanity, your strength, and your right to rebuild a life that feels grounded and real. Because we're going to close the episode with the truth that carries all of this. You deserve relationships and a world that lets you stay whole. Okay, well, we've covered a lot. We've covered patterns. We've covered leadership. We've covered personal relationships. We've covered boundaries, identity, healing, and rebuilding. And this last part is simple. It's about staying whole. The world pulls at people in 100 different ways. Some of those pulls feel loud, some feel quiet, and some feel familiar enough that people forget that they're draining. Narcissistic patterns are one of those drains. They chip away at your confidence, your clarity, your peace, your sense of worth. They're in your head. Staying whole means you stop giving pieces of yourself to dynamics that don't honor you. Not through anger, not through shutting down, but through intention. You learn to recognize the signs, you learn to trust your voice, and you learn to protect your peace. You learn to choose relationships that give you room to breathe, and you learn to walk away from the ones that don't. Human first leadership inside organizations, families, friendships, and love anchors itself in dignity. It refuses to treat connection as a transaction. It refuses to use shame as leverage, and it refuses to confuse intensity with closeness or control with care. Human first leadership says you matter, your heart matters, your truth matters, your boundaries matter, and your story matters. Even if someone else never saw your worth clearly, you still have the right to live in a way that honors it. You don't need anyone else to validate your experience. You don't need anyone else to rewrite it. And you don't need anyone else to bless your healing. You get to choose how your life feels. And here's the deeper truth, the one people forget. The moment you stop shrinking around someone else's insecurity, you create space for real connection. And that's connection that's built on honesty, on presence, on mutual respect. Connection that's built on accountability instead of fear. That's where healthy relationships live. That's where healthy teams live. And that's where healthy futures live. You deserve that. Every listener deserves that. Everyone who has lived through these patterns deserves a life that feels steady again. You're not broken. You're not weak. You are not naive. You didn't fail. You didn't imagine it. You survived something that bends good people in complicated ways. And now, guess what? You get to build something better, something honest, something grounded, something human first. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for listening with an open heart. And thank you for caring enough about yourself and the people that you love to learn how these dynamics work. Because you're still here and you're still trying, and you deserve a life that lets you stay whole. Well, all right. Well, thank you again for being here today. Thank you for sitting with a heavy topic and staying open. If this episode gave you clarity or language that you didn't have before, I'm grateful that you listened. These patterns take a toll. They drain confidence, connection, and peace. And talking about them honestly helps people get their footing back. And you showed up for that work today. Before we close, I want to send you out with a song. This song is called God Complex. I wrote it from the same place that this episode came from, watching how ego, control, and emotional manipulation tear down trust, and how powerful it is when people finally stop bending themselves to fit someone else's chaos. You'll hear that in the lyrics, and it'll be a great reminder for when you need help working through these narcissistic patterns and claiming your life back again. Enjoy the song.
You walk in and everything shifts. Nobody wants to be in this. We all feel it, something cold. You act like you're in control, but no one here is fooled today. Your presence pulls the light away. You think you're owed the final say, but all you do is ride the space. We used to hold our breath for you. Now we're just glad when you leave the room. You got that God complex, big mouth, fake it, deaf. You tear things down to feel in charge, then play it off like you meant no harm. But we don't flinch, we don't crack. You burn the bridge and we're not coming back. Like it's peace, make your damage sound like belief. Call folks off when they push back, then go quiet just to bait the trap. You don't belong in honest rooms. You poison trust, you bend the rules. We used to try, we used to care. Now we just want you nowhere near. You ain't complex, you ain't wise. You're just small and weaponized. You got that God complex, that loud voice, reap respect. Always looking for control, but nothing grows around your soul. We saw the play, shut it down. You burn the bridge and we're not sticking around. You're not a monster, just a coward addicted to the sound. The power, you had your shot and you abused it. Now we cut the cord and you can lose it. We don't care how loud you cry, you're not welcome, and that's why you're on the outside throwing rocks. But no one's listening, the door's locked. You got that God complex, still shouting, still a wreck, still hoping we'll come back around, still trying to burn the whole thing down. But we moved on, and that's a fact. You burn the bridge and no one's looking back. Whoa. You're not misunderstood, you're just done.